Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. So total box office amounted to around 71 million for the weekend. This is just Friday to Sunday. I did not include the additional Columbus Day, or Indigenous Peoples Day, if you will. So this is just a normal 3-day weekend for your reference. It was about a 20% drop, which is not great, but also, like I've been saying a million times, I feel like a broken record. This point of the box office season, we're firmly into awards season, right? October has begun. We're halfway through the month. So we're going to be seeing a lot more films. We're going to see a lot more smaller films be opening. And I think it speaks to the fact that the number one movie this weekend was only brought in about 14 million. So let's talk about that number one, though, because it's interesting. So opening at number one this weekend, Terrifier 3. I did not see this coming. I don't think anyone saw this coming. So this brought in just a little over 14 million for the weekend. It had the best per theater average of the top 10 at around $5,600 per theater. And as you can see, compared to the projections, this did very, very well, right? It was only projected to make around 5 to 8 million. So this almost doubled that high-end projection, right? Reasons for this, it's still kind of up in the air. You know, I'm going to leave that to the experts, some people who like really analyze the box office for a living, right? Who like that's all they do. My understanding is these results are due to a very targeted marketing campaign to like the very niche audience that would like this movie, who would want to go see this movie. You know, it's perfect timing, mid-October, right before Halloween's about to happen. Might say I really don't know anything about this franchise. I guess it's the third film in the Terrifier franchise, which itself is a spin-off of another horror film that was, I believe, like an anthology horror film, and this is like a spin-off of like one of the segments in that film. The other films that were not well received or well beloved, but this one has actually gotten semi-positive reviews, which is is a low bar, but compared to the other films in this franchise, is like a big success, right? But the biggest success here is like, okay, 14 million, who cares? It was made for $2 million. It was made for $2 million, right? So as you can see, that percent return is insane, right? That worldwide total of almost $19 million, it's already at, what is that? Almost an 850% return. And this is why so many cheap horror films are made, is because they don't really cost that much. And so even if they don't make a bunch of money in a vacuum, it's a pretty good ROI, right? So this is a very interesting turn of events. Definitely one of the more surprising, happenings in the box office in the past couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see if it holds in the next weekend and the weekend after that. But in any case, even if it's left theaters right now, this would already be a huge mammoth success for this film. Also opening this weekend was it feels like I'm about to say like a Mad Lib sentence. The Pharrell Williams Lego animated biopic called Piece by Piece, opening at number 5, bringing in just a little under $4 million, just barely squeaking into those projections of around 3 to 7 million. This is a very strange. I don't want to say the film is strange, but like the whole thing about this film is strange. So again, if you haven't heard of this, Pharrell Williams decided to do like a film version of his life, but do it through Lego, and like as if it's like one of like the Lego animated films, which is like a really bizarre but charming and ingenious idea to do something like that. We've already seen like the idea of an animated documentary is nothing new. But the idea of doing it like this is something I don't think has ever been attempted before. But if you notice here, it's a little bit concerning considering the film cost $16 million. So it's firmly in the red right now. I'm not sure what they were expecting, though, with this film, because it's one of those things where Pharrell is obviously still really popular and successful, but I feel like the time to make this movie would have been, like the late 2010s, like 2016, 17, 18. That would have been the peak of kind of his popularity, because obviously he had been in the industry for like he's been a central part of the music industry, particularly hip hop, for decades now. But usually behind the mic, not behind the. I'm using like film terminology, like behind the camera, but not behind. He was a producer on a lot of stuff throughout the years. Particularly, I think like the big one was "Drop It Like It's Hot," like the Snoop Dogg song. But of course, his big claim to fame would later be working on "Blurred Lines" with Robin Thicke, and then of course "Happy," the Despicable Me song that came out in 2014, I think, and that was huge, right? And I feel like, while his career is not in a bad place necessarily, it's certainly not those highs. So I wonder if this movie would have done better if it was released even as late as 2019, like right before the pandemic. Because it's just, I just don't know. Because something I was wondering is like, who is this movie really for, right? The diehard Pharrell fans, I don't know if they're going to be super into going to see a Lego animated film ostensibly for children. I want to see that movie, but I think people who are kind of, if I'm going to paint with a broad brush here, those hip-hop fans might not be super inclined to go see a movie like this. And then vice versa, the children that presumably this is also being marketed to, do they even really know who Pharrell is? Do they care? Like, I just don't really know who this was made for. But it seems to be pretty good. It's been getting good reviews. I'm going to see it this week. I'm really excited for that. Supposedly has like a depiction of like the Black Lives Matter protests following George Floyd's murder, but like in Lego form. So that's like going to be kind of like not funny, but just like weird that's going to be in there. And from the trailers, it looks high quality, at least in terms of the animation. Like, even though it was only made for $16 million. Actually, you know what? I'm going to double check. Let's see what the original Lego movie was made for a decade ago. So a decade ago, that movie was made for $60 to $65 million. I wonder where that money went to, specifically. This obviously is not that quality, quite. Whereas that movie almost looked photorealistic, like it almost looks like it's stop motion of Lego. But this is not looked to be a cheaply made animated film at all. So that's going to be a little disappointing, and well, maybe I'll have some legs, but I am a little skeptical of this film's success, which is a shame because it's such a strange and interesting idea. And as we know, I should get like a sign so I can like hold it up when I'm about to say this. But Hollywood always takes the wrong lessons from success and failure. So my concern here is they'll take a look at this and go, oof, they took a risk. We shouldn't do that, right? Also opening this week, we had My Hero Academia, You're Next, at number 8, bringing just a little over $3 million. This is like a spin-off or a film offshoot of the anime My Hero Academia. Don't really know much about it. I know it's one of the bigger anime, but I just don't really know much about it. But it did fall below the projections. It was projected to make around 5 to 9 million, so fell below that. But most of its money, as you can see over in the worldwide column at 27 million worldwide, it's already been playing in other parts of the world. I would presume Japan being the big one. So, I feel like any domestic release is really just to bring more awareness to the brand and make as much money as it possibly can. Also opening this week, interestingly, is the controversial Trump biopic, The Apprentice. I've talked about this movie several times on my channel. You could go find those videos to hear a little bit more about the history of this film. Opening just barely squeaking into the top 10, bringing in only about 1.6 million for the weekend, which is disappointing. So it was projected to make around 4 to 7. Had the lowest per theater average of the top 10 for the weekend at $900-ish per theater. It did have a smaller release, right? It's still technically a wide release. Wide releases are considered wide if it's 600 theaters or more. So this is well above that, but if you compare it to some of these other films in the top 10, like Joker is still in over 4,000 theaters. Even Piece by Piece is it's about the same. I shouldn't really compare it to that, but it's definitely a more limited release. I wonder if that has to do with theaters not wanting to show it out of fear of retaliation from like Trump supporters. I'm not sure. But this is definitely disappointing considering that it is way below its budget, right? So its budget is around 16 million. So it's like an almost negative 90% return. Now, to be fair, there is a factor to this because we're dealing with smaller numbers, right? So if your movie cost $100 million to make, $1 million one way or the other isn't going to be a huge percent difference. Whereas when you're talking about a $16 million budget, $1 million is going to be way a bigger swing in one direction or the other. So this may not be as bad as it appears. I don't know if they're planning on ramping up the release as we get closer and closer to the election, which would be insane, but also like maybe brilliant. But we would have to see. I don't know if it's that strategy or if this is like the big blowout and it's going to get smaller and smaller every week. So this is definitely disappointing. I've heard it's good. I'm going to see it tomorrow, I think. So, I'll be the judge if it's good or not. But, I'm sure that's a little disappointing, especially if you are very, very anti-Trump, which of course I am. But, if you're someone who just likes to, like, if your whole news diet was just hearing about how Trump's life was bad or something bad happened to him, I'm sure this is disappointing because this is like the exact opposite, right? Also, not quite opening, but we have a film, indie film. I'm going to try to start monitoring this, or at least kind of showcasing it a little, because we're going to have a lot of films as we go into award season that are not opening, but they're going wide, right? So they may have only been in a handful of theaters, like maybe just a couple dozen, or maybe even like less than 10, like you could, a single digit number of theaters. And one of those films is Saturday Night. So this jumped from 19th place to 7th, right, in its third weekend. So that's like an over 1,000% jump with its $3.4 million box office return for the weekend. It added, as you can see here, almost 2,300 theaters, right? So it looks like it was only in maybe a couple dozen theaters last week anyway. Did fall below the projections though. It seemed like it was going to make somewhere closer to 9 to 12 million, and again fell way below that. This of course is the film about the production of the first episode of Saturday Night Live. And it follows like that one evening. It's kind of like in real time kind of movie of like all the chaos leading up to going live at 11:30 p.m. or whatever. I would have thought this would have done better. Because, SNL, while, everyone always says, oh, it's not as good as it used to be, but like every generation says that. I don't really watch it, at all, so I can't really speak to the show's current quality, but it did just enter its 50th season. So you would think that maybe, and I'm sure that's why they made this film and released this film when they did. But I'm surprised that it's not doing, better. I'm curious. I'm curious why that is. I don't know if it's the marketing, because I feel like I've seen a lot of marketing for it, but maybe the film doesn't feel as SNL-y as it needed to have that synergy. And this brings its complete total to a little over $4 million. But again, like we're seeing a lot here with these films off of a $27.5 million budget. So it still has a long way to go that, to even come close to crossing that initial threshold of matching the budget. A couple other notes here. Still in the top 5, we have The Wild Robot, holding its second place spot in its third weekend, bringing just about $14 million, so about a 25-ish% drop. This is something I've been talking about over the past couple weeks, that while not opening super big, the idea seemed to be that they wanted to have a slow and steady approach, that they wanted to, that it was going to make back its money, but just more slowly over time, which seems anathema to the modern Hollywood business practice, but luckily it seems to be semi-working out. We'll see if it holds, but it has had pretty good legs up to this point, even just in 3 weeks. As you can see over on that far right column, the percent return, it's around 91%, right? So it's crossed that initial threshold of what's the phrase? Matching the budget. But ideally, you want to double the budget to account for any marketing costs, which aren't included usually in budgetary figures for films. So it's so close. And it couldn't happen to a better film. It's I wrote a review on it. You should go check out. It's really, really great. So I hope that people keep going to see it, especially as we move into the more family animated film season, right? Like I wonder how this is gonna play. I'm trying to think of what other animated films are coming out in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to kind of do like a quick little pull up here. Let's see what's going wide. I'm not seeing anything. I know we're having Moana for Thanksgiving. And I think that might be the next big animated film is going to be Moana 2. So it'll be interesting to see. That's about 5 or 6 weeks. What can the Wild Robot do with that time? Because once Moana 2 comes out, presumably, it's going to be over for the Wild Robot. It's going to be Moana time. Though Disney has been really struggling on that Thanksgiving slot for the past couple of years. So will Moana 2 break that curse due to the brand recognition, or will it fall flat on its face like so many Disney films seem to have been doing lately? Also still in the top 5, we have Beetlejuice, holding its 3rd place spot in its 6th frame. So this thing's been out for a month and a half now. Brought in just a little over 7 million. Again, this has had pretty decent legs so far. Kind of holding out the best it can. Brings its domestic total to almost $300 million, right? So we're around, 276? It's worldwide, it's about $421 million. So obviously most of this money is coming from the domestic market. But considering the film was only made for like $100 million, I would say it's a pretty good success, but I wouldn't say it's a mammoth success by any stretch of the imagination, right? Also, speaking of, if Beetlejuice is a good success, Joker Folie à Deux is a mammoth failure. So Joker Folie à Deux, it only brought in about 7 million. It dropped from 1st to 4th place in its only 2nd frame. Dropped 81.4%. That's awful, and it already didn't open very well to begin with. It looks like it's on track to. What? I don't even know. I was gonna say it's on track to at least make back its budget. Right now, worldwide, it's around 165 million. Off of a $200 million budget. And it looks like most of its box office is coming from overseas, which is interesting, because this doesn't really seem like a film that would have broad international appeal, but I don't know. It just seems like the reaction to this has just been so poor from critics and audiences. Usually you can maybe succeed if you have one or the other on your side. More so, you really need audiences if you want a good box office return. And it seems like this is one of the least well-received comic book adjacent movies in terms of audience reception that we've seen in a very long time. So it's interesting to see a film that, sequel to one of the most successful films of all time, falling so flat in its face. Only other note I would have here is The Nightmare Before Christmas is back in theaters, right? Every year they do a little re-release. Brought in just a little, about 2.5 million, which falls into those projections. But I have over here, just for fun, the total domestic and worldwide numbers for the film across all 30 years of the film being out. And considering it was only made for $18 million, this extra 2.5 million adds to its already pretty decent return on investment. And I think the only other film I didn't mention here is Transformers 1. I thought the film was okay. I really don't care about this. It dropped out of the top 5, dropped from 4th to 6th place. Only brought in just a little under 4 million for the weekend. But it actually finally met its budget in a sense, right? So now the question will be, could it double that budget? My guess is going to be no, but, I have, as viewers of the show know, I have been wrong before. And then looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have Smile 2, the sequel to the not super well received, but I think it was a financial success, that horror film Smile. I admittedly have not seen it. This is projected to make around 25 to 31 million for the weekend, and this is going to be, what is it? I think this, no, that's not true. I was going to say, we basically only have 2 more weekends before Halloween. And then the next weekend after that will be November, the first weekend of November. So it'll be interesting to see, will this film be able to capitalize on the spooky season, or will it kind of fall flat? And I'm going to quickly look up the original Smile, because I'm curious to see how much that made in its opening weekend. And that came out 2 years ago, so it shouldn't be that far off in terms of inflation. So yeah, it opened around 22 million, 23 million. So this would be, you know, on par with the original, if not a little bit better, right? So it'll be, so who knows what's going to happen. This box office, this whole year has been so unpredictable. So I really can't say anything for sure. And then we also have this smaller indie film called Rumors, but spelled like the British way with O-U-R-S at the end. It's kind of like a political black comedy of sorts. I don't really know much about it. I heard it's not great, and it's only tracking to make around 1 to 4 million. So, you know, if you're putting all your money on this movie being a huge financial success, don't hold your breath. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.